This is Jerry O'Green, Black Student Advocate, here on the video call with Ms. Laster and Ms. McHenry, Dr. McHenry. Go ahead and please introduce yourself and who you represent individually or your organization.
My name is Dr. Darleana McHenry, and I am the CEO of St. Cary's Center. We are an expanded learning center. We provide consultation, teacher trainings, parent trainings. We also provide direct services to students, and we're in the process of opening a preschool so that we can address the needs of our younger students.
My name is Christina Laster, appearing as myself, civil rights activist, child parent advocate, and education reformist.
So let me ask a couple questions to begin. Dr. McHenry, are you only going to have a single site, or are you looking at a multi-site for your?
I am looking at multiple sites. I'm also looking at putting information online so that parents may access it. I'm looking at culturally responsive teaching, culturally responsive learning, and culturally responsive classroom management. I'm looking at addressing the issue of Black underachievement, and I'm also looking at addressing the issue of equity. What does an equitable classroom look like? What does having all of your students achieve and be successful, what does that look like?
And Ms. Laster, exactly what kind of work do you do and in what area?
Well, within the education realm, just working with parents to bring awareness about their options and choices for quality public education. Also building awareness around the achievement and how that is actually an access and opportunity gap, or either benefit, so basically showing parents how they need to make informed decisions about where their child goes, all the way from pre-K to 12th grade, because that if they don't make an informed decision, their child could be trapped in a felon school, and that'll hinder their access later on in life. And so you don't want to wait too long. So basically doing that. Also working with educators and schools to build equitable models that actually work. My statement is that, we can't get to the equity piece until we got equality. So building awareness around that. And then let's see the specific needs of students in your environment, okay? So that takes a little level of, unconscious bias and removing stereotypical behavior and thinking outside the box. So I do talk about strategies where we can move and think outside of the box. Also just, supporting employees that have had discrimination issues, complaints. There's a lot that I do just within the educational realm, but those are some of the main items that I am working on currently.
Okay. And Dr. McHenry, you've been in education a long time. So based on what Christine just talked about, let's get your perspective as from inside the building. How are staff being treated in the conversations that you're having, that you have had, and your experiences?
I think one of the major issues is unconscious bias. If you are a member of the dominant group or the majority, then it's very easy for you to feel as if your culture is the only culture, and your belief system and your value system is the only value system, and to try to force everyone to promote that system. And I'll give you an example. Most cultures, people of color, we tend to be very interdependent because that's how we survive. We have to have the village, and the village takes care of us. And so this emphasis on being independent, this emphasis on being efficient and isolating African-American children or brown children from their culture in order to achieve the American dream is very detrimental in the long run, because we're a whole person and we need to feel comfortable in our culture, and we need to feel comfortable to share our culture and to have that respected. And so there's been research on internal locus of control and people with external locus of control and people who are socially interdependent. And people who are socially interdependent are no less intelligent than other people. And there's a significant amount of research that shows that Black girls get less attention in classroom with white teachers than any other group. And that they are constantly looking for assurance, and they have a high level of anxiety because of that. So they're always looking for the validation because they feel as if they're being ignored. And then the negative treatment is reinforced because then the teacher is saying, you should be more independent. But we have to be able to validate each child and make sure that they understand that they belong in our classrooms and that we're going to work to ensure their success.
And Christina, to spin off what Dr. McHenry just said, what kind of work have you done outside the building to?
Well, I want to address one thing that she said in the sense of building cultural proficiency by removing some unconscious biases that one may hold in the educational environment. So let's talk about that for a second. It's very difficult to build that type of model and add in cultural proficiency and remove unconscious biases when 85% of the teachers in the classroom are white women, okay? So when you have those layers of things that are added in there, okay, 85% of teachers are white women. Also, they may have some unconscious biases that they hold and not even be in projecting them onto the student. That is where you see the expectation levels vary, okay? So when we're looking at unconscious bias, the thought that people have put in a bucket when they see you, what color you are, and there's research to show that newborn babies are able to differentiate color. So no adult can tell me that they don't see color, right? So babies are able to differentiate color in their parents' arms, and they recognize their parents' responses to certain skin tones. And so that becomes a part of a systematic way of thinking that's ingrained since their children. And so then you have an adult that also recognizes a Black, brown, white student, and maybe unconsciously or maybe consciously sets a level of expectations due to their experiences or their thought process behind that. So we have to talk about that first. And when you have a lack of overall cultural proficiency and looking at where does that come from in the educational environment, it directly affects and impacts the experiences and the expectations of the students.
Mr. Green, I just want to give a reference for what she just referred to. Scientific American Mind wrote an article on the research that shows that children as young as 8 or 9 months of age recognize racial groups. They recognize what racial group they're in, and they recognize whether or not they're in the dominant racial group, if they interact with other races, or if they see other races on television. And they're able to pick up on this because of the body languages of the adults in their life.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now, Ms. Laster said, and Christine, can I call you Christina?
Yes, you can call me Christina.
So Dr. McHenry, she quoted a number of 85% of educators being white. Let's roll back the onion and the time and talk about how did that happen. Can you give us some backstory on that as to the conversation we were having before we start videotaping?
Absolutely, and I want to bring it current in terms of California as well. In anticipation of Brown versus the Board of Education, it was very clear when the Civil Rights Movement was gaining momentum that there would be integration and that segregation would be struck down. In anticipation of this, 10,000 Black teachers were laid off. And when one of the Black teachers who had a master's degree sued in Kansas and said, listen, I got a master's degree. Why are there white teachers who are less qualified and they're still allowed in the classroom? The judge specifically said that no decent, self-respecting white parent wants their child taught by an uppity Black person. So what you have when Brown versus Board of Education happened was that Black principals in Black communities were transferred. They became assistant principals, and then white principals were brought into Black schools, and they became principal because no school wanted Black principals over white students. And so we saw the closing of education in regards to Black people going into education. The other issue that has an impact is that now in terms of social media, this has been over a 50-year period. I want to bring a 60-year period actually, but I want to bring it up to date. There's research that shows that education, liberal arts colleges review the social media profile of potential teachers. And if you have any social justice issues on your social media profile, you are denied admittance. We know that school districts look at your social media profile. And if you have any social justice information on there, then you are not called in for an interview. Or if once you are hired, they see any leanings towards social justice, you are considered a troublemaker, and then you don't make the 3-year mark to tenure. I want to look at California because California is shifting. We are one of the most diverse states in the union, and 65% of our teachers are white female. We are increasing the number of Latino teachers, which is absolutely wonderful. We've increased funding for Latinos in terms of migrant education and ELL education, and so we are seeing some gains as we should. The number of Asian teachers has increased tremendously, and we're seeing gains from Asian students. And the number of Black teachers in no way reflects the number of Black students in the state, and Black students are suffering because of it. If you look throughout the districts in California, you will see where Black students are underachieving in math, they're underachieving in science, they're underachieving in reading. You will see that Black girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended. They are 3 times more likely to be expelled. They are 3 times more likely to be expelled than any other girls, and 6 times more likely to be arrested. And the arrests are not due to crimes. They're due to teachers calling the police or the school resource officer because of the girl's attitude, something she says, truancy. None of those are really the criminal acts, but yet they're getting pushed out of school. And I think those are some of the issues that we're facing now with this crisis. And we're going to have programs that specifically address this population. We can no longer lump everybody into the same bucket and say, you know, we're going to create these programs that helps everyone. We're going to have to look at what the barriers are for each group, like we've done in the past, address those groups. So now it's time for Black students to be able to benefit from some of this identification and some of the interventions that will be helpful in closing this achievement gap.
Okay, let's just, you know, I want to kind of expand upon that from a civil rights perspective and from what the child may be experiencing as well. So, you know, even as a young lady, a little girl, okay, let's call it a little girl, when they get dolls, okay, and they're playing with dolls, right? And we've all seen this research, you know, the majority of the dolls for Black children had not looked like them. So then you have them play with these dolls for however many years that they're playing with dolls, and then guess what they feel about themselves? That they're not beautiful, that they're not worthy, that they're everything that society has basically perpetuated onto them. because they have nothing that they can identify with that looks like them to say, hey, you know what, me too, I am important, right? And so then you have, there's just so many layers to this, okay? And then you have where, you know, the schools are not only looking at social media profiles, but also paying attention to names. Because I will tell you that I've had tons of overqualified Black teachers, Black administrators with their credential, with their administrative credential, you name it, counselors, psychologists, overqualified, and they've had to basically apply for 30 plus positions just to try to get an interview. And then they'll see that they've been bypassed for someone who wasn't qualified as much as they were. And they have the experience, they have the years. And so I think there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of lies being perpetuated saying that there's not enough Black qualified people that want to be teachers or want to be administrators. And I'm here to debunk that from the civil rights perspective, because there are qualified teachers, school psychologists, counselors, educators, para-educators, whatever, that want to work beyond the kitchen staff or the one Black employee at the school, but they haven't been given the opportunity. And that is where there's a big gap and also a big misconception. So whoever the child is in contact with, and that stems from way back what society has already taught. We see that the babies recognize color changes by the time they're 8 months, and they recognize the people's behavior, their parents or other people in society's behavior due to the color, right? And then you have the toys and the games that they play with. There's no cultural identity in that for Black people, for Black children, especially girls. And then not only that, like she's saying, the punishment because of the expectations based on our girls. No, our Black children are not angry. Maybe they're just not understood, right? And so the Black girls get punished for their cultural identity. And then they try to assimilate, but that's not very effective because their level of expectations on them are already set based on the color of their skin. So it's this perpetuated, repeating cycle, trying to sift and fight through that as a small child into high school, you know, with nobody to identify with. And I will tell you that the Black employees that are on school sites are inundated by being the go-to person for all the Black children, even if they're not qualified to do that particular job. It might be a behavioral, intervention or something else, right? But that's not even their position. However, you're the Black person on campus, it's a Black kid, let me go to you. So there we have a problem that needs to be addressed beyond just who's being hired and who's not, because it all stems from thought processes that are oppressive and racist. And until we identify that, we're going to still continue to go around in this circle of what next? What do we do now? How do we do this? We have to identify the root of the problem. And so beyond social media, people are looking at names on applications. Is that an identifiable Black name? And you know what? That application may be overlooked. And then there's people that are within the district or whatever framework, and they're looking for advancement opportunities within their position. And guess what? Well, you know what? Try in 5 more years. We're going to hire someone less qualified. And it's based on skin color. No one can say that it's not.
I want to expand on that, because one of the issues that have come out, and I've experienced this too, working with other people in different kinds of educational program, you see the adultification of Black girls.
Yes.
And when I have just asked questions around that issue, what makes you think of this girl as quote unquote being too grown? You have 2 7-year-old girls here. And one of the issues or one of the comments that we find is body type. Black women tend to have thighs. We have, that's a West African trait that you look at the sprinters and you look at a sprinter's body, and our girls tend to have those kinds of bodies. And many people associate that with adults and being older. The other issue, when I started to peel back that onion, was the fact that the Black girls know how to dance. Okay, we know there's a significant body of research that shows that dance and music is excellent for the brain and can be a deterrent to Alzheimer's. Yet Black girls who can dance are considered sexual no matter how young they are. And there's a picture rotating on social media where a Black woman and her daughter are doing this dancer's pose with their leg in the air, and the white woman and her daughter are doing the same pose, and yet people are judging the Black woman and her daughter harshly and referring to her with sexual names because she's able to show that she can stretch her legs. And so you take two identical acts and they're perceived differently. You look on television, the dance shows, the white girls who can dance, they're dancing to Beyonce's music, and that's considered a talent, that's considered a skill. They're entertainers, and they're considered for opportunities. You have a Black girl who does the same thing, and they're over-sexualized. Right. And we have to take a look at that, because when you have so much negative interactions with people who are in charge in school setting, it becomes like a tail wagging the dog. You just go around in this kind of negative circle, and I'm not seeing any kind of intervention to break this. I'm seeing educators get together and basically accept a salary and say that nothing can be done to close the achievement gap, and then everybody comforts each other because they've been working so hard doing what they've been doing for the last 100 years, which has not been effective.
Right, and then you get the student blamed for their body type, well, and the parents, right? Well, what do they have that on for? Well, were they supposed to tuck their thighs and hips away at, okay? So, and I'm not saying inappropriate dress. I'm talking about appropriate dress, but like you said, we're curvy by nature, okay? So if that intimidates you, I'm sorry, but that's who we are, right? And there's expectations on our girls, not only from the society side, but like in the educational environment. And I want to bring up the fact that there's harsh treatment and punishment that have tripled to our girls in the educational construct, because a lot of people were talking about the African-American male disciplinary actions, which are still in existence. However, there are some school districts that are priding themselves in the fact that they have been able to successfully drop the percentages of those African-American male punishments, those harsh, exclusionary, punitive, excessive punishment practices, right? However, what people are missing the data on the Black girls. So where you might have suspension rates drop for the boys by a very slim percentage, but that's progress as long as they're working towards a goal in their mind. What you see is a tripling of the punishment practices, even more extreme towards the girls. So how has anything shifted in the thought process?
And I think something else that a lot of people probably don't know is that when it comes to discipline, it's Black boys, then Black girls, then every other race of boys.
Right.
So Black girls are disciplined at a higher rate than any other race of boys.
And the things that they're being disciplined for, you will have 5 girls and they're all dressed alike. But because the Black girl is more curvaceous, she'll be suspended and she'll be up for expulsion for wearing the same types of outfits as the other girls. And so this whole policing of Black bodies, there are so many educators. When I did a survey in terms of why Black educators were leaving the profession, they said it was because they couldn't be scholars, they couldn't be instructional leaders, because they were simply expected to police and control Black bodies. So all of the teachers would send any Black child who they had an issue with, instead of dealing with that issue, addressing that issue the way they did with anyone else, they would send that child to the Black teacher's classroom, and so he or she would have to stop teaching to deal with another teacher's discipline problem. And that other teacher could have created that problem, but they were not responsible for solving that problem. And so if you're not going to be allowed to be an instructional leader, where is your career going to go in this system? And so it's unfair to the teacher as well as unfair to the child that you have to be sent out because you're such a bad person, or you're such a frightening person that the people that are responsible for you won't interact with you.
And not only that, but, due to the fact that, there's not a lot of imagery and in a positive light growing up as a young Black girl, you get the kind of bully effect from the kids, or the isolations, right? So the other kids think you're tarnished too because they haven't seen anyone, any images with braids or Afro puffs or things like they played with, right? Even whatever image it could possibly be, from a video game to an actual ball, play kitchen, what's on the boxes, what's on the packaging. They have not seen these images of Blackness portrayed while they're growing up. And so the little girl that is Black and gets to class has to then go and fight for her identity among the people that can't stand her identity because they don't understand it, or they don't understand how to tolerate it, or then that person can become isolated or excluded. And it might be, again, one of those covert things or one of those overt things. We're not able to tell at pre-K. We can see it, right? But then here's the interesting thing. When you bring it up and you've identified something as exclusionary or isolationist about your kid, the number one statement is, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about that because they learned that in the home. Well, wait, I'm entrusting the child to you, and I thought that you would be able to intervene on behalf of the child. But again, you can't expect for people that hold the same belief process to intervene on behalf of your child against other people that are holding the belief process, right? So that's where we have to address the root of the problem. And until we address that color lines do exist, oppressive practices exist because of color lines, then we're not going to get very far.
And I'm going to have to agree with that and cite examples. The fights that my girls have gotten into was when they decided to wear their natural hair. They get teased by other kids, and then Black kids aren't sure how to respond because they're in the minority and they haven't seen positive images of Black women and Black girls with their natural hair. And they watch the adults tiptoe around it and say, well, kids are being kids. School needs to be a safe place for everyone. Schools operate in loco parentis. They operate in the absence of the parent as the parent, and that environment needs to be a safe place for every student. So to say that students are going to make racial remarks or students are going to be unkind to children of different culture and they just have to learn to tough it out and be okay with that, it's just blatantly wrong. And yet we see that over and over again, and people saying, what do you want me to do? Well, what I want you to do is I want you to address it up front. I want you to talk about it up front. I want you to set the tone and send the message that it will not be tolerated. And I want you to implement some kind of program where children are rewarded for interacting with each other in a socially appropriate way. And I want you to model how to interact with children of different cultures. And I don't think that that's too much to ask.
And I just want to cite that basically we can see that there's still a problem that exists, right? Or else we wouldn't have had this recent bill signed, right, this month, right? So California, and I'm citing an article from the Los Angeles Times. Anybody can look at it. It is called California Becomes First State to Ban Discrimination Based on One's Natural Hair, right? So California just became the first state to outlaw racial discrimination based on hairstyle. Governor Newsom on Wednesday signed a bill into law that legally protects people in workplace and K-12 public schools from discrimination based on their natural hair. The new law, which takes effect January 1st, prohibits the enforcement of grooming policies that disproportionately affect people of color, particularly Black people. This includes bans on certain styles such as afros, braids, twists, cornrows, and dreadlocks, or locks for short. He said that the need for protection entered the national political consciousness in December when a referee forced a Black wrestler from New Jersey high school to cut his dreadlocks or forfeit his match. That indignity forced the student to choose whether to lose an athletic competition or lose his identity, Newsom said. Okay, you can go on to read more about that. And also anyone that wants to research that particular bill can also look that up. But what I'm saying is that that's the thing that we put on top of the system to basically medicate the problem, right? We need to start addressing the root of the problem. Why are we having anti-discrimination laws still created in 2019 based on hairdos that disproportionately reflect Black people? The root of that is something that we need to discuss.
So, Christina, I'm going to change lanes and talk about, with that, the laws, the perspective of you dealing with the charter school or the school choice issue, mainly in California, but also articles being written about your comments on a national level.
Okay, well, yeah, let's talk about that. So basically, when I entered into the battle for school choice, which it wasn't like a first for me, right? Because I also advocated for choice for my own children. So my children were treated poorly, marginalized, mistreated, not educated. My 3 oldest daughters, guess what I pulled them out, I homeschooled them. I used the charter school platform to do that. I was confident in everything they were doing. They were succeeding, they were excelling, and I had no problems, right? So me as a parent, I had the option and the right to be able to say, this particular structure over here is failing my kid. And being a previous educator of that same framework, San Diego Unified School District is where I worked, I knew that I couldn't change district behavior. You cannot change district behavior, but I could change my behavior, and that's what I did. So as a parent, I had a right to say, this is where I want my child to go instead of that failing construct, that failing framework, and that failing foundation. So I'm going to take my child out of that failing situation and and it was 3 of them that I did that. And I'm going to put them into a situation where they will be supported, they will be able to actively thrive, and that's my choice, okay? No one should be able to take that right away from the parent.
So right now, dealing with, and again, I read the resolution and the moratorium from the NAACP, and it never mentioned the Black student.
The original moratorium in 2016. Okay, so let's talk about that. Anybody can look that up on the website. You know, the original moratorium for charter schools did not mention the Black students or the Black student data, right? So we entered into a whole moratorium saying, you know, we're gonna support the halting of charter school growth and development, but now the Black students weren't considered into that factor. If they were, I can't find it either. Could you find any language that spoke to where the Black students were mentioned or their achievement? And as a matter of fact, I was looking for those achievement factors and data in that original resolution. However, it was adopted, right? So here we have the adoption, and then a task force the next year created around the whole charter school issue. Fine. even if you have a moratorium on something, that means that you're supposed to stop and pause to look into that a little bit more, right? So it doesn't mean to totally annihilate, kill, or destroy that thing, okay? And what people need to understand is, just because the organization recommends that you do something and they don't support a thing, doesn't mean you, the person, have to make that choice to follow along. You need to do the research, and you need to find out for yourself what is the best educational environment for your child. No entity, organization, governmental agency, politician, I don't care if it's social services, okay, should be able to monopolize on your rights as a parent to choose the best quality public education for your child. You don't get a redo. We need to clarify that.
And I think we need to say something else, and that is that the district cannot meet the needs of all students.
What did you say? I'm sorry?
I said we need to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yes.
The district cannot meet the needs of all students.
No.
And they have shown that. So if you cannot meet the needs of all students, why are you going to hold all students hostage, knowing that you're failing with a large number of students in your schools? So then you're going to eliminate the parents' rights or options to choose an alternative when that would not be acceptable for your child. So you send your child to a private school, you send your child to a school in a particular area where the schools are being successful, but you force other people to send their children to failing school, and there's nothing you will do or nothing you can do if you're not doing it to make those schools successful. And I think that's the real issue in terms of school choice. Parents should be able to put their children into a school that is going to meet the needs of their child. And if the public schools and the district schools are not meeting that child's need, then you have a right and a responsibility to be able to remove them. But the advocates, and I was a very strong advocate of public school. And at some point I had to realize that there were a significant number of public schools that were failing our students, and they were receiving an inordinate amount of money, and yet there was no accountability. And if a parent protests, then that parent is issued an injunction, and that parent is not allowed to be on that school campus. But you're going to have that child on the school campus. There's an issue with that child, but you have a court order or some kind of edict that says that that parent cannot come on the school campus and check on their child. Something is very wrong with that.
Right, and that should raise a red flag to any parent that they can't even go on the campus to find out what the instructional time looks like, who is all involved with their child's education, what's going on at recess. Is my kid, getting into fights, or, anything that you, the parent, and they say it poses a risk. I understand that, but once you have a volunteer badge and you still get halted from being in certain situations, then that's a red flag, right? Even the Ed Code grants the parent a right to do a classroom observation if they notify the teacher in the school 24 hours in advance that they want to do that observation, yet those observations are being denied, okay? So here's the factor. Let's talk about the history of this, because this is not something new. This isn't something that just sprung up into our view, and we're not just, basically finding out today, okay? So there were issues with the educational system already, okay? A lot of people were feeling like it was a system of colonization and different things like that. We won't go into the history of that. But then you enter the Black student, and that becomes a level of forced integration. And anybody that says that it hasn't been forced integration, they try to use models of, well, my kid goes to this school and, they're doing good and they're Black. Well, yes, that is a small percentage when we look at the population at large, the Black population of students at large. We see the truth when we look at that. So depending on the construct and model you're using, and that's why I try to talk about token integration, which is that percentage that's doing well in the schools and their parents don't have any issues, right? And then when we talk about the system of gradualism, as far as integrating Black students and building equitable models and equality into the public construct of school education, the district-run schools, that is a very gradualistic kind of thing, okay? And then we talk about modalities of learning. Well, not all children learn under a system of uniformity. So when you have this 6-hour day construct and there's no room for the child that may learn differently, then guess what? That child then gets pegged, especially the Black children, as a behavior problem, or, you know, they can't learn, so we might as well not even waste our time teaching them. So giving those parents and those children freedom of movement to say, you know, my child's not doing good here. I know my child, and I'm going to take my child to where they will do well. That is the parents. That should be the parent's choice. Nobody should be able to take that away. We see historically that Black children have been underserviced and failed in the district-run school, okay? Why is it that they have to be trapped there? They shouldn't be able to be trapped there where their self-determination and free will are constantly under attack, where their drive and expectations are constantly being questioned and attacked, where the parents do try to be involved, but guess what? That's constantly under attack and question. And then you have the rhetoric saying, well, the Black parents aren't involved and they're not engaged, and that's why their students are failing. Well, that's a lie. Because all the Black parents I know are involved and engaged. And all the ones that have come to me for help are highly involved and engaged. But that level of involvement and engagement that they tried to build into the district-run model was not welcome. It was not welcome. So telling those parents, you know what? Too bad, so sad for you and your level of involvement, trying to build an APAC, trying to get funding for an APAC, an African American Parent Advisory Council, or any kind of other council that services the Black student. We're gonna wait. We're gonna do it gradually. We're gonna, you know, maybe 3 years from now, if the budget allows. Well, wait a minute, my student already attends this school and receives dollars per year. You're not servicing my student according to the money that you do receive, right? So if I wanna come in and help, you're gonna deny me that access, and then now you're gonna say, I gotta keep my kid trapped in that system and that framework. Well, that is a civil rights issue. Some people just deem it as an educational option issue, like, oh, we have this big school choice battle and we don't understand. Well, no, this is a civil rights issue when we're talking about the Black community and them not being failed in historically generational schools, district-run schools that have failed us since the beginning, since we integrated. And yes, we do have a margin of population. I always talk about me being a benefactor, a beneficiary of token integration, okay? So I'm on the winning side of token integration, right? But I don't see that with all of my children and grandchildren. So how is that winning? You know, if I'm talking about school issues and integration issues that my dad experienced, and this is generations later, or that my grandparents experienced, what do you call that? You call that progress and change? Or how long are we supposed to wait? And then you want to tell these same people that have generationally, historically experienced these issues to keep their kids in failing schools. We're going to get the dollars for your kids, but we're not going to service them.
You know, when I looked at the resolution, it talked about basically charter schools and $3 billion that was unaccounted for, lost, or what have you. And then, just like you said, you look at all the generations that have been going to public school who have not got their needs met. So to lump that and say $3 billion versus you could say that with a big district like a RUSD. Let's go 6 or 7 years and there go your $3 billion, you know? So, or 10 years, excuse me. So, but what I'm looking at is saying, and the other side of it is, I see what's different around the country compared to what I've seen in California and charter school that I know people who have started, where they started because they wanted to start and have a need. Versus there are some parts of the country where charter schools are started and they cherry pick the best kids. So then they get the best kids and leave the more challenging kids in the public school system. So now their numbers look off the chain versus just taking kids for where they are and trying to meet the need. You know, Dr. McHenry, you want to speak to that?
I can. And I think we have always had people come into our community and try to be our savior. And when you look at charter schools that have cherry picked from the community, that's what you see. But when you see African Americans set up alternative education centers, you see them accepting everybody who comes through the door, working with parents, working with students, and closing that achievement gap and making a difference. You also see an extraordinary amount of pushback in terms of people being uncomfortable with that model and trying to sabotage that by withholding funding, by a smear campaign, by canceling different contracts and not performing certain repairs or making the building safe for students. You also see, and I think Christina kind of hit on this, I've benefited from this token integration. I got through the eye of the needle many, many times. And there are people like me who have gotten through the eye of the needle, and they look back and say other people should be able to do it as well. And I am one of those people that say that other people should be able to do it, but you need to widen that needle. You need to create that bridge of opportunity. I don't feel that other people coming behind me should have to do the things that I did. I feel that once you see how capable I am, once you see how competent I am, you realize that you are missing out on a lot of talent. And so you make access to opportunities more readily available. And that's something that has to be addressed in terms of the number of charter schools that are owned by African Americans and looking at how well those schools perform and being able to get those schools the resources, and also being able to understand that many African Americans, economic instability is a part of our culture. We've seen it for years. We built this country. Slavery was the largest commercial and economic institution in this country. There's none that compare to it. Yet, when we started to work for ourselves, what happened? We got lynched. We got gang raped. We got our businesses burned down. We got terrorized. And so there's a form of that today, and we're going to have to address it. So you'll see a staff that starts out really, they start off really excited, they're energized, they're motivated, and then as they get this pushback for being effective, they start to become afraid of their own careers. If anybody's going to hire me because I'm African American and I'm associated with this institution. And so you see that progress stymied. And we're going to have to come together in these rooms and actually talk about that and how we're going to address that.
Right. And so, it's really interesting to me that when we as a Black community start to discuss building our own, right, having, places where our children can thrive and achieve, then all of a sudden we're segregationists and Black nationalists, right? I mean,
right.
Free from those accusations. I'm not a Black nationalist. What I'm talking about, though, is creating an environment where our children thrive, okay? But yet they're segregated and excluded and isolated every day that they step foot into the district school. So wait, let me just touch on the integrated student real quick. Now, if you're the beneficiary of token integration, you have to perform way more, because I was on the principal's honor roll, so I get it. But that performance had to be way above the other people that have 4.0s because I was Black. And guess what? this one is a good one right here. She is so smart. She's so bright. Think about the language being said about the token integrated Black student. Oh yeah, she's a great, good job, basically, pat on the back, right? But then when you get to college, guess what? You're the only Black person in the class at this private university where they're allowed to pick whoever they want. And then you've got to perform 3 to 5 times more than your co-peer. They don't even have to show up. As a matter of fact, when I got into the university that I went to, I had a advisor tell me, Christina, you're the Black kid and the Black student in the class. Be there every time. They're gonna notice when you're gone, but nobody else is gonna be noticed for chronic absences. So you're gonna have to be there. You're gonna have to have your brightest smile on, and you're gonna have to perform. And I did that until I graduated from that university. I will tell you that much. So when we talk about the token integrated person, is that really even a good thing though? Because there's a lot more pressure. Then that pressure follows them into the job place, because guess what? I gotta perform 5 to 10 times more on average than the other person because I'm Black, and you gotta gain a trust for me and see my work ethic, but nobody else's ethics are questioned, right? And so that's the same thing that trickles down to our kids that are picked out to be those token students, those perfect students. And the language that you'll just start listening, the language that you'll hear that surrounds those particular students, you don't hear for their counterparts that are not Black.
I was talking to a parent probably 2 hours ago, and she lives in LA now, but when her kids were attending Riverside and at King High School, her daughter and son were catching hell, and she didn't know. And she thinking, hey, we moved from the community where our kid had these challenges, so now we're going to give them another opportunity. But now she says her daughter was saying, Mom, I was getting teased all the time by white students.
Every day.
Every day. And saying that because I was a dark child, I was a Black student. And then her son tells her, yeah, I was getting teased also. And because he was light, he couldn't be with the Black students and he couldn't be with the white students.
Right.
So they called hell. So it's a different level where in the community many times you think about violence, but then you take your kid and put them in a different environment. Now it's mental stress every day.
And they have to zone out.
An increase in suicide.
Yes, and they have to zone out. And, basically they have to zone out. They can't be themselves. The pressure on them to perform is greater than any other thing. And they have to go back to the community that they live in, and there's expectations for them there. And then, just all kinds of just layers and layers and layers of stuff that our children have to deal with, right? Just to make it through. And then you put added other things on top of that. It's very hard. And so the thing about it is that we've talked about this before. Parents, if your children are not saying anything, then I need you to ask. And I ask, every day, hey, you okay? Did anybody say anything to you, do anything to you? If not, it's fine, but me, I'm your mom, and I'll fix it, right? So sometimes my kids will be afraid to tell me stuff. They're like, nah, if I tell my mom this, we might not have a mom tomorrow because somebody else going to be taking care of us for a week, And so I had to basically talk to my children and say, listen, this is my job as your parent, is to be concerned about your well-being. And if someone is saying things to you that are not right, and this is my advice to the parents, that's why I'm bringing it back to the parents on this one, right? Or acting a certain way that you don't feel comfortable, I need you to tell me. And I don't need you to tell me 2 or 3 days later. I need you to tell me when it happened. And, whatever means you got to use, text message, write a note. Look, my daughter carry a journal, okay? Don't do nothing to my daughter because she got it written down. And she's going to tell me this happened at this time on this day, and this person did that. And I'll be like, got it, okay? But it's sad that I have to even give my little Black child a journal so that she could document exclusionary, segregative, discriminatory practices at 13 years old. Who does that? What other 13-year-old has that quality of life if they're not Black? I mean, come on. Why do you do that? But parents, you need to be asking your kids, give them a journal. If if they don't feel comfortable talking about it, doing like the model I gave my daughter. She's had a journal since 4th grade, and nobody can take that journal away from her either. And she documents these things. And if you look at them in isolated incidences, then you would think, oh, well, that wasn't that big. But when you see the pattern in the history and the data compiled, you get to see, oh, my child is being, targeted. And why? Why is that,
I dealt with a school psychologist at LAUSD after the mom had a conference with them, and the mom came out of conference so frustrated and upset because the whole conference, the psychologist was telling the mom, it's your fault that your kid is having all these issues. And when we had a conference 10 days later, I told the school psychologist, stop it. How are you going to be trying to convince this mom that when her son comes home, she say, how was your day? Now the little boy got to think of the worst part of his day to say something happened. No, he's living in his reality, and he's assaulted in your school where you didn't provide a safe environment. And she just want to make sure her baby is safe.
Right.
Dr. McHenry.
Yeah.
So with your experience, 30, 40 years being in education, hearing about the moratorium by the NAACP, seeing what's going on, and both of you can speak to this, what's going on in the Riverside area, NAACP, when students and Black staff are catching hell every day in the district, but the local chapter is silent and not doing anything. What is your take? What is your...
Let's identify what branch we talk about. You got the number?
I don't know the number. I said Riverside, let's say downtown Riverside, NAACP.
I believe that is branch 1035.
Okay.
I don't know. Johnny Karina probably know that. We don't have to ask.
Okay. So
Okay, so from my perspective, I find it very unsettling.
Yeah.
Because the NAACP was established as an advocacy organization, and it was established as an organization that was for the common man and the common woman to receive redress or to have their grievances heard in regards to race. And so now we've made this issue about charter schools, we're making it a partisan issue and saying that charter schools are only for rich white kids who don't want to attend school with Black kids. And perhaps there's some merit to that from 30 years ago, but in this day and age, qualified, talented educators recognize that that is a vehicle that we can use to educate Black students because they aren't given an opportunity in the district public school settings. And I need people to think about this because, Christina shared that 85% of the teachers in this country are white females. There are people who are going to say, race isn't important. But if you were to suddenly change all of the teachers and have 85% of the teachers in this country be Black females, do you think those same people would be silent? I dare say they would not. They would conduct research. They would show that race does matter and children having appropriate role models matter. And I think we're going to have to go back to that. We're going to have to go back to looking at the systemic oppression and look at the overall issues and address it. Black educators are not being treated properly in public schools and in districts.
Right. And so, you know, we have a more than a civil rights issue, right? This is about human dignity, okay? This is about the dignity of our children, the self-determination of our children, and the access and opportunity for our children being hindered in the educational system. And so it's interesting to me that civil rights organization would say, we're going to keep that, we're going to lock you into that by giving you this advice. And we're going to say for you to go ahead and keep your kids in the spelling system while we work on it. Well, how long is that going to take, right? And so again, when I talk about the moratorium on charter schools, when that was first brought out, that was supposed to be a pause, not a complete permanent spot. So this year, with the resolution that was not admitted, that was basically denied because the state and national already have a position on it, we presented the Black data. And we also said that we as a people should have our rights respected to be able to choose quality public education for our children. And not only that, but then the district should also be just as accountable as the school choice platform to create robust education, right? Accountability. So we have accountability on one end, and there's already a level of existing transparency measures and different things like that that were already set in place in bills for charter schools, right? So why do we still have this pause? We have Stanford showing that all across this country, in low socioeconomic societies, Black students are the main benefactor of charter schools in school choice. It's undeniable, the data, okay? Then we talk about California data in particular. What is happening with the Black students here in California? On average, and I've repeated this so many times that people believe it or they don't, and then I show them the data for their particular district. I'm not even, saying that I can't show you the data for your particular district, but I will let you know that there's a state average and there's a trend, okay? All districts fall into this category. Jerry, you can confirm that because I put some data on your page yesterday. So 80% of Black students can't do math at grade level in California. 68% cannot read or write at grade level. What does that mean? That means when you go onto the CAF website and they have this tricky language where it says exceed standard, standard nearly met, below standard, right? So what does nearly met mean? That means that they did not meet the standard, meaning they're not at grade level, okay? And so we see 80% of our Black students across grade level can't do math, okay? 68% can't read and write. People talk about small districts, okay? Let's take this for example, because this example is already on Jerry's page, and you can look at the data that I already posted on there. We were talking about Santa Ana, okay? So I picked Santa Ana Unified School District. Santa Ana is the third largest county in California, the population-wise. Yet it only has 1.02% African Americans living within that county, in that community, that area, that region. In Santa Ana Unified School District, they have 56 students, and those students are still the numbers that I gave earlier. 80% can't do math at grade level. About 70 in there couldn't read or write at grade level. So you mean to tell me that in a school, a district of 56 total Black students, we still got the same problem we see statewide, okay? You can pick the highest populated, African-American populated school districts. That would be San Diego, Riverside County falls into that category. I believe Moreno Valley adds to those numbers and some other areas. And then you have San Bernardino. So across this region, we have the largest percentage of Black students. And you see the same numbers. So it doesn't matter if you're the 56 or the 1,000. Okay, the data is still the same. As a matter of fact, I believe that I posted Moreno Valley's data. In Moreno Valley Unified School District, it was more than almost 80% that couldn't do math at the grade level. More. So you have to disaggregate the data to find out what's going on with African American students, and when you see it, it's very dismal. So then you get the arguments over, well, you know, it's because of the test. So you mean to tell me that this large percentage of students are all not able to take the test, and that it's something wrong with the test, or you're saying there's something wrong with the student? Please clarify that, because this couldn't be the trend in this whole entire state. And then if we looked at it nationally, you would see the same thing.
Dr. McHenry, you want to speak to it?
I mean, when I initially started to do the research, I just thought that that it couldn't be true. And the deeper I dug and the more information I came up with, I was really appalled. I could not understand how a school district that receives $300 million in funding can have only 7% of their African American students graduate college and career ready, and everybody be okay with that and be silent. I could not understand how districts with a $500 million budget could be failing so many African American students and everybody be comfortable with that, consider that to be par for the course, and no one is held accountable. No one faces any consequences for that. And to now see that we want to take away any options or any other opportunities, we're basically recreating a system that existed 200 years ago when Black people would be hunted, literally hunted and killed for learning how to read and for learning, for any kind of academic, intellectual activity. And now we are blaming the students, we are blaming the parents. We are the only profession in the world that gets to do that. If a car doesn't have the salesman doesn't blame someone else for that. They look at what they can do in order to sell their car. GM was the #1 manufacturer of cars at one time. It is not Toyota's fault that GM can't sell cars. It's GM's fault. And yet we accept that with any profession that has failure. When it comes to education, we have every excuse in the world not to change, not to make it inclusive, and to make it exclusionary. And I am amazed when you compare the budgets. I've seen budgets in the South where you have large populations of African American students. A district will have a $10 million budget, and 85% of the students graduate college and career ready. They leave, they go to college. Their main complaint is that there are no jobs locally, and so a lot of the talented students, they have a brain drain because they want to go to bigger cities, they want to go to more urban areas, they're young people, they want to have certain entertainment, and yet you have districts in California, $250 million budgets, $300 million budgets, $500 million budgets, and they are failing to educate students, and there is absolutely no accountability. So I think it takes people like Christina and I to keep beating that drum and saying something is wrong, letting parents know you deserve better, your child deserves better, and that the education has to be relevant and meaningful. We keep getting these models from other cultures and other countries, and we keep trying to ram it down our kids' throat. Our kids have to live in this culture. They have to live in this society. And our country is actually built on economics. It's built on finance. And that's what we should be teaching. we should be exploiting our strength, and our strength is creativity. And we know that Africans and African Americans are some of the most creative people on the planet. So other people can take our creativity and they can become millionaires and billionaires. Yet when we try to utilize our own creativity, then something is wrong, and that's substandard. So school is where it starts, and school has to be where the battle is raged. And parents are going to have to stand up for their children. The Black community is going to have to stand up for Black kids and say, we recognize the issue. You are not alone. We are here for you, and we're going to support you and make sure you get the education that you need to be a contributing member of society. How do you develop a self-driving car that doesn't recognize Black people and runs over them? Because you had nobody Black in research and development. Now, come on. You got a self-driving car that doesn't recognize Black people as human beings, and you have to pull it off the street because it will run over and kill Black people because it doesn't recognize them.
Right. And, it's really tragic that we as a community have adopted language and rhetoric and believe lies. I'm not saying I have, but I'm saying that for the most part, when I try to talk to the Black community about school choice, there's a lot of layers that you got to get through, okay? And, it's really tragic when you don't have the support of the most respected civil rights organization. Now, see, it's kind of like one-sided. I'm not even going to say kind of.
Well, let me say this. Hang on, Christine. Let me say this right here. But see, part of the resolution that they came out with, and which always have hurt us, is when they use phrases like all students, people of color, minority, and diversity.
Right.
Anytime you start using phrases like that, that dilutes, and that means Black folks don't get anything.
Right.
That's why we have to be specific when we say Black.
Right.
Target it, and we know from which, when we rise up as a community, everyone rises up.
Exactly.
But everyone else can rise up, and we can be left at the bottom. And I think that was a big issue when I read the resolution. It's saying all is doing this, and the target is the charter schools, but in that school choice is going to be the hybrid online courses and everything else that charter school offers. But again, it was a good target in which people could get behind, because many times they can relate or see a charter school and say, yeah, that's them. But then that's how they blindsided. So again, I'm for school choice. I'm for parents having an opportunity to make an educated decision for what's going to be best for their children. Go ahead, Christine.
And so, when we talk about the charter schools in California, I needed everyone to be aware that only 50,000 African-American students statewide attend charter schools. 50,000. So we're talking about Black students, right? So 50,000 Black students in the entire state of California have decided to be partakers in school choice. The parents decided to put them there, right? That 7 out of 8 of our students are in district schools. So instead of the focus being on those 50,000, why is there no accountability measures on the district-run schools, and we're still trying to have these meetings in these APAC buildings? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because it's going to take a multi-layer approach, right? But who's holding the accountability for that? So where's the accountability factors? Why aren't there any bills like there was AB 1505, 1507 for charter schools? Why aren't there bill creations for the district-run schools for accountability the same? So what you see here is...
well, let me answer that before you go further. The reason that is because the elected officials want the support of the teachers union and the money for the teachers union. That's just the bottom line. Because anyone who understands and can see the numbers would say something's not right. We're putting all this energy, like you said, on the 10% and not talking about the 90. And anytime you talk about Black students, oh, we got work to do. It's never immediate.
No.
But other things are always immediate.
Oh, yeah. Let it be PTA or DLAC or something else, right? We'll get to something else, and then we'll come and talk to you, right? As a matter of fact, I brought up this example before where it was stated in the meeting that 95% of the district's funding, and I'm not going to call this district out today, you know, we're going to be nice today, was spent on personnel. And then 5% was with, you know, various student supports, different things like that. And they just didn't have the availability of funding to give to APAC. Well, you know what? Wait till next year's funding budget, you know, comes out, and we'll see about that, right? So do you expect APAC, then African American Parent Advisory Council, to the district and the students and the parents for their benefit? Do you then expect for that APAC to raise funds to be able to accomplish the task of making the students college and career ready, for building in cultural proficiency, for helping out with ways to culturally engage the students? I thought that was included in the original package that you were getting funding on, right? And so here we have this big pension crisis. And you can look at on the California State Senate hearing website, you can look at July 10th hearing, Senate Education Committee hearing. You can watch it, and you will hear one of the senators say, the students are not responsible for the pension crisis. That's not their problem. And they shouldn't be having to be forced into these systems that have historically failed them because we have a pension crisis, right? So trying to build up the pension crisis or pay the union dues off of our kids' backs, but then don't even provide a service to them is what we see here, okay? They're not gonna be able to solve that debt. They didn't even create that debt. So why are they having to suffer and inherit that debt? That's like me telling my 8-year-old son, you know, that Social Security problem in the nation, sure, that's your fault. You know what? I'm gonna need you to go to work. Forget about school, forget about everything else. I'm gonna need you to go to work, even though you're 8 years old, go strap on some steel-toe boots, get out there and start earning that Social Security so we can build it back up. That wasn't his responsibility, right?
Right.
So then you just took away any other potential or ability that he may have had during the rest of his little childhood and life, because you have an adult debt and an adult responsibility, and you want to trap him into that failing system.
And you used a phrase once before we were talking, talk about them and us, meaning adult issues versus kid issues.
The financial insolvency of the district or any other situation is not a child problem. So nobody should be balancing their books on children. That's they didn't create that debt. Why are they inheriting it, and why are they suffering for that? So that's equivalent to it's not going to be a good example, but we're gonna go on to throw this out here because we having a Black folk conversation today. That's like me saying I'm about to put everything in my kid's name. Okay, that's not fair to the child because they just inherited debt and credit situations and things like that that they're not, first of all, even aware of, didn't have any say in. And now they have to spend the rest of their years trying to figure out how they're going to resolve that, how they're going to fix their situation that they didn't even create. So when you trap the kids into a failing school because of your fiscal insolvency problems, and it can't be the 50,000 African American students are creating a debt crisis, right, or a pension crisis for the state. That's unbelievable.
And they're not even in the district.
So this thing is one of those stages where we got to bring a little bit of awareness and then we dive in deeper. And so right now, basically, these bills were constructed because of the so-called fiscal transparency. Well, we like to talk about that, and then they always try to say, well, look at what the church school did. They over here, operated and stole all this money, but I just thought that happened in Corona at the school district. They embezzled money and nobody pays attention to it. No bills are created, right? Where are the bills for that? And didn't that just happen a few districts? Okay, we're not gonna name no names. I'm gonna let Black student navigate to that.
Oh, Lake Elsinore or Temecula.
Oh yeah, they was in the paper too. But we didn't have the.
Let's not exclude Palm Springs Unified and the high school bookkeeper who embezzled hundreds of thousands. And guess back at $300 a month now that she's retired.
Mm-hmm. So what you see is there is what I call that they speak hypocrisy and blasphemy fluently, right? So they're good at speaking hypocrisy and blasphemy and saying, we're going to hold this area accountable while we get away with practically anything we want. And let's guide that by, like Jerry said, oh yeah, we're working on it. We're creating these programs, we're creating these protocols, and we're gonna make you feel good for a little while, but you know what? In the end, it's still gonna be the same effect, right? And then you have these sales pitches that are being brought to the community about why school choice is horrible 10 times more than why school choice is actually a added benefit, right? So when you're the union, you got money to do those sales pitches all day. And so parents and the community have to then sift through what is the truth. And like, we talked about that data, when you start to look at that data, it's so dismal that initially it's unbelievable. And you try to wrap your mind around some kind of justification, some kind of rationale, some kind of reason of why this data is this way. And that's what we have with a lot of people. They're not willing to admit that we got a systemic, oppressive, discriminatory issue, which is a civil rights, human dignity issue here in the public education system, in the district-run schools. And until we address that, then we're not going to get very far. Like you said, we're going to be 200 years from now having this same discussion. Well, I'm not willing to make my children and grandchildren suffer for their lives and their livelihood. This is about their livelihood. And I'm not willing to enter my son and my grandson into the school to prison pipeline, knowing the outcome of that, right? And just sit back idly while these things happen. So we're gonna have to push past the discomfort. We're gonna have to look at the actual, true, factual data that California, you can look it up on the California Department of Education, task scores. California dashboard will give you a good picture of the punishment practices. And you have to disaggregate that data for the African-American students in order to see what is going on. And so when we look at that, that is going to be uncomfortable. And when we couple that with what the actual employees are saying themselves and the lack of cultural proficiency that we see, I mean, you can get a bingo night before you can get a Black History Month celebration. Come on. So when we look at all of these things together, then you'll get to see there's this common thread. It doesn't matter where you go. We have to begin to then feel the discomfort in order to push past the discomfort. There is no collaboration if we can't actually come to the table with the truth and what is going on, and not shifting the blame or allowing other people to be the scapegoat, like the charter school. Well, you know what? You can talk about charter school and school choice school district to get the blame off of you. But the accountability needs to come right back to where you're at. What have you done historically? Because this is a new platform, but what have you done historically to fix your act? I haven't seen anything. What they do with Black parents that are vocal like me, they'll just wait us out. And guess what? The new generation will come in with the same issues or maybe worse, or I wouldn't be talking about my grandparents' problem today.
Dr. McHenry, as we wrap up, anything in closing?
I just want to indicate that we are in a crisis situation when it comes to the education of Black children. And we are uncomfortable. We're going to have to make other people uncomfortable in order to affect change.
That's it. Christina, in closing.
I agree. And, there has been several times that I said, what is happening with our students is a state of emergency, okay? It's a state of emergency what is going on with our students. And so here I am admonishing you, the parent, find out the facts for yourself. Don't let a political entity, an organization, however good the name is, make that choice for you. This is your child. You do not get a second chance at this. Pick the very best thing that you can, educational-wise, for your child, because that's going to directly impact the rest of their adult lives, which is longer than childhood. So if you allow the government to direct and monopolize on your children from pre-K all the way through 12th grade, or any organization to direct that, then your child is going to suffer for the rest of their adult life. And then they control the monopoly on what areas they go into, where they're going to work, everything else. At least give them a fighting chance. And what I'm saying is, your child best, put them in an environment that supports the modality of learning, where they can thrive, where they're not secluded. There are several models. And if you need help with that, I will help you with that. But don't just start doing research. You don't even have to take our word for it. You can go and do the research and the data dive yourself. And what you're going to see is going to be uncomfortable. But you're going to have to push past the discomfort in order to get to the truth, in order to get to change. And if we all do this very same thing, then collectively, we can make a difference. This generation is doing it. But it's going to take time to stand up, fight back, and say, hey, wait a minute. The rest of you up here, you don't speak for us down here. These are our children. We speak for them. And denying them even the opportunity, when they count you out, vote them out, period. That's the end of the story. And so we need to take back our power, take our power in whatever way of our children, and not allow anybody to direct that. And that is going to be my challenge and my charge to you, the parent, to go ahead and find out the research data on your own and move in the direction that is best for your child. You only get one chance. Stand up and fight back. And like I always say, free these young minds, let my people go.
Again, this is Jerry L. Green, Black Student Advocate. Thank you, ladies. Have a great day.